Welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy and why we need it in our business, communities, and our life. Today's an exciting day for me as I sit down with Ashley, our Permian Environmental President, to discuss how in the world as an oil services company, we have an environmental team. So, welcome to the podcast, Ashley.
Well, thank you, Shane. I'm very excited to be here.
Ashley, you've been with Wescom for how long?
About 2.5 years now.
And you came in as 2.5 years ago. We had a very small, if we can even call it, an environmental department that was doing a little bit of spill cleanup. And boy, how many folks are you running or managing now?
Well, we have three full-time field techs that do work for Wescom, and then we have two embedded field techs with a production company.
Okay, and so these embedded field techs, what's going on? Is this something that we went out and advertised, or has there been a change in our industry that kind of is driving this?
Well, actually, it was very interesting because we had done work on the environmental side for this production company before. We just built some really great relationships there. They knew about our capabilities and they came to us with this opportunity and said, hey, what about us having these direct reports that come just straight here, and we will contract these Wescom field techs through this company, and they'll just direct report here to us every day and help us out on our air quality.
So let's talk air quality, right? This is so cool about our industry because, as you know, our industry gets some pretty bad rap, and especially under the current administration that we have, that as though we're some big evil companies that aren't doing the right thing. And I oftentimes have to remind my peers that we actually are not in. We're not an oil production company. We're an oil field services company. So while I appreciate their desire that I would lower the price at the pump, that's really not my role. My role is to provide a good service to our clients, right? And you and your team do a superb job of that. But I always do like sharing the story of what the production companies really are doing. So when you say air quality, tell us what that means for our listeners.
Well, so in particular in New Mexico, we are the second largest state in the US for oil production, second to Texas. And oil and gas is responsible for over 1/3 of New Mexico's revenue as a whole. So we have a very progressive policy that has come out in New Mexico as far as air quality and emissions. There are two state agencies in New Mexico, the New Mexico Environmental Department and the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. And they were tasked by the governor to come up with a methane reduction strategy. And this was to be implemented by 2026. And it's very aggressive, very forward thinking. To the whole goal was to have a 98% gas capture rate. So it is very, very forward thinking, is very heavy on incentivizing the production company themselves to capture their gas, stop unnecessary venting and flaring of natural gas, and kind of come up with some new technology to monitor these leaks and emissions in New Mexico.
So air quality specifically is more driven by the state agencies in New Mexico than anywhere at this
Well,
time.
there are EPA and federal regulations, and kind of the way it works in environmental is it's whichever regulation is the more strictest. So we have the federal regulations that we have to comply with on the EPA side, the Quad A, Quad B, and then we have the local and state regulations that we have to adhere to as well.
So as these regulations came out through the governor, especially in the state of New Mexico, but just overall, even within the EPA, what are you seeing our producers? And we only know the side that we work with, right? And we luckily work with the very best producers in the country. And I think it's important for us to share that what's their attitude towards these regulations? Did they embrace it? Are they fighting it? How are they feeling about these new regulations?
No, it's very much our operators are embracing the ESG attitude, this environmental compliance attitude, and it's how can we continue to operate in this new environment in a sustainable, renewable, and environmentally responsible way. So there's been a lot of unanimous support for these regulations from the producers, and things are progressing and moving quite along. But pretty much every producer has their own ESG program now. The goal is very much net zero emissions. Can we produce oil without the emission problems? So this is something that everybody's very accepting on. I don't really think oil and gas is going to go anywhere, but it's how can we be competitive against other renewable sources like electric and solar and wind?
And frankly, how can we do it better? And I think
Right.
that that gets lost in today's conversation when we talk about renewables and all the other opportunities for energy. We forget that the oil and gas society wants to just say there's no need for it, rather than what we're saying in the industry, and especially our producers are saying, is there's still a need for this, but we're going to acknowledge we need to do it better. And
Hmm.
and not just on the air quality, but tell me about our spill cleanups we're doing. Isn't that way different than what we first did even 2.5 years ago?
Right. So New Mexico did just pass a rule where it is unlawful to have spills in the state of New Mexico. They did have unanimous support from the community and from producers for this new spill rule as well. And it's how we're going to go in and clean up our produced water and oil spills, how we're going to prevent this from happening again, and how we're going to do it in the best way possible.
So when I've actually was mistaken by this when I first entered the industry. When I heard the word oil spill, I'm thinking back in the 1980s over here in the Twin Ports, we had a really bad derailment of a train, and like the whole town had to evacuate, right? Well, a few years ago across the bridge over in Superior, Wisconsin, they had a refinery blow up, and they actually had to evacuate the city. That's what comes to mind when I hear spill. But we've been involved. What is actually considered a spill? 5 barrels or more?
Yes, it's reportable if it is more than 5 barrels. That is a minor spill, and then what the agency considers a major reportable spill is anything over 25 barrels. So, and this most of the time happens from, we'll be doing some sort of facility maintenance and a valve isn't tightened or something that's supposed to be closed was left open. So these are very much accidents, but could be prevented if you were following the correct processes. And so when there is a spill, there's a formal reporting process with the NMOCD. A C-141 is filed, and then you have 90 days to address the spill cleanup.
And our producers that we're working for, anyways, when there is a spill, like you said, it could be something as simple as an operator when they were restarting a well forgot to turn a valve on or off, or maybe something rotted and the pumper didn't catch it, and now there's a small leak. But it's important to recognize that every leak that happens on these locations, our operators, and it seems to be every operator in the area, has a vested interest to try and do the right thing and get that thing cleaned up. And when we say cleaned up, tell us about that process. Sometimes it starts with we go in and pressure wash, suck the oil out, pressure wash. What's that process like?
So it's a very involved process. There is a little bit of research that we do prior to actually going out to do the cleanup. We need to know what our depth to water is in the area. We need to know what the karst or the caverning potential is in the area, which is huge because there's a lot of underground caverns where we live in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and that influences what criteria you have to adhere to when you're doing the cleanup. So we start off doing the initial background information check or categorizing the spill, so to speak. And then we'll go out and we may do some sort of initial cleanup or delineation. We'll find the horizontal and vertical extent of the spill. And then we'll talk about it with the client, see how they would like to proceed. And then we move on to the final excavation and or remediation. Once we have removed the contaminated soil, we'll collect our confirmation samples, submit those to the lab, and then we move on to either the deferral or closure report writing process. And that's what gets submitted to the state at the end of the project.
So this isn't something where we just show up and between us and the operator we say, well, how could we disguise this really quick and suck up the oil and throw down some new gravel. This is one thing that I think is so important that the industry or that the folks know. on the Energizing America podcast, anyways, is like this is what the producers are doing to ensure that when that oil well is all done producing and it's capped and plugged or abandoned, whatever the situation is going to be, cattle are roaming on there as though nothing ever happened, right? It's just we're returning that ground back to its like condition prior to anything ever happening.
Right.
Tell me about how you feel about software in the environmental world, because all this automation happening in our industrial world, and especially in the oil field, that we're seeing now operators are able to, from their Houston control room or their Oklahoma control room, identify issues and send out pumpers. And are we using software in the environmental arena?
We are. So, our AVO inspection reports that we do, on a weekly basis, we go out and we actually perform what's called an auditory, visual, and olfactory inspection. And we're kind of boots on the ground, walking around the equipment, making sure there's no leaks. So we do have a software that we use on an intrinsically safe device for that. We have GPS software that we use to map spills when they occur. I can create some pretty interesting figures within ArcGIS. That's how we put together our sampling maps for our closure and deferral reports. But it's very much a push towards automation and how we can do things better. And it's a little bit of a catch-22 because as we go to these remote operating centers, I think some people really understand the necessity for the boots on the ground. You can't really replace the person that's out there walking around these locations and catching things and catching leaks before they become big spills. We've got a corroded, leaky valve here that's eventually going to cause a reportable spill in the future. So it's great, but then it's kind of hard at sometimes.
Yeah, we haven't quite figured out how to catch the software.
Mhm.
Sometimes some producers are putting cameras out on locations and doing flyovers, and that'll catch known leaks. But really, what we want to do as an industry is catch it before it becomes a known leak,
Right.
right? Like
Mhm.
catch it before it's that 5 barrel spill. And we've seen some of our producers do some pretty hefty upgrade projects once they've been able to identify that, hey, we're seeing a repeat failure here, so let's
Mhm.
go ahead of the curve and do a bunch of water retros before they become an issue, right? And I think that's really commendable on our producers' part, that they're not just sitting back and going to complain about the regulation of needing to do things better. We're trying to do root cause and make it so that the facility is better going forward. You touched on something, Ashley, that I think is really unknown in the oil industry as well. So once a week, we're going out and doing this AVO. Tell
Mhm.
me more about that. Like, is that we're going to every location every week?
Yes, so and it's kind of broken down into weekly and monthly AVOs. So some of our sites that produce more than 60,000 cubic feet of natural gas, they require a weekly AVO. And anything lower than that gas rate triggers a monthly AVO inspection. And so we have a field tech that just goes out to the same sites every single week with his little intrinsically safe tablet. We built our own AVO inspection form and report within Wescom, and he goes through all of the equipment, walks the tanks, the containments, looking for potential leaks. And then also, if he finds something that might be leaking, we're completing the first attempt repairs. We're notifying the producer if we do see a leak, and then it's also great because we can catch things that could cause potential issues later, even on the spill side. Is there a hole in the containment liner? Can we get this patched? Did we see a containment overflowing or overfilling? And so that's part of what makes what we're doing so great, even on the air side, is that there's so much crossover that, can help on the spill side as well.
Right. So having one company that can do both of these services really helps their producers. And frankly, is why we got involved in it, right? We didn't,
Right.
I wish I could brag and say that, I was forward thinking and thought, boy, I see an environmental crisis coming. I'm going to open up an environmental department. That's not quite what happened. What happened is we kept getting called out to do repair work. And we started asking producers, like, hey, what's going on here? How many people are involved in one repair? And they had their environmental consulting company that might identify the issue. Then they had, the roustabout company who would come out and do the first attempt of repairs. Then they'd call the environmental company back to do another check on it. And then, ensure if it wasn't completed, then the roustabout company would have to come back and complete it again. And this whole cycle caused us to stop and think, boy, there's got to be a better way. And that app tool, especially for the AVOs, has really made it awesome because we can identify repeat sites. We can ensure that they're all getting hit. But over above all of this, I think the best part of it is, and the untold story is, look at what we're doing from an environmental perspective in the dirty oil and gas industry, right? Because that's what people think of. They think of oil and gas and they think of dirty. But we've had the privilege of working across many industries here at Wescom: oil, gas, mining. We're down at the railroad. We're in the shipping. So that means that, the freighters that are taking iron ore across the Great Lakes. Yesterday, we were in a concrete plant. There's a grain elevator we were in yesterday. We're at a printing press. We're in all these different industries. And there is not one of those industries, while I love them greatly, and they all do a great job doing what they're doing, none of them have the same amount of effort placed on the environmental that the dirty oil and gas does. Not a single
Right.
one.
And it's easy to think of oil and gas as this big, ugly monster that needs to be rooted out. But when you look at the people involved in the oil and gas industry, this is your blue collar, working class, heart of America people that want to energize America. They want to provide for their families. They enjoy the outdoors, the hunting, the fishing, and we really just want to ensure that what we have is around for future generations.
I think that's what's so cool about the very people that work in this oil and gas industry. They're the biggest proponents of the land that they're disturbing because they're the biggest users of it. And so, you're from Carlsbad area, from Roswell and that area of New Mexico. Tell me a little bit more about the reaction in that community to oil and gas. Are they all in?
Well, southeastern New Mexico is very much all in pro oil and gas. The rest of New Mexico kind of operates on a different bandwidth, but I think that it's really just in everybody's best interest, and especially the locals' best interest, is that we know that oil and gas is a necessity. The revenue that it provides, how much our producers give back to our local communities and what they provide. We want to make this relationship work. And it's how do we get to this goal of net zero emissions? How do we clean up our footprint? What do we do to make sure that you want to choose oil and gas versus some other renewable form of energy? And that's really how we all need to work together to achieve this common goal.
Right. Like let's show the good part about oil and gas because frankly our industry has done a really bad job of highlighting that. And I think it became a all in or all out. And the reality is we can be in many different forms of energy and we can do them all very, very well. And I know that when I've been in Carlsbad and you boy, you'd spend a few minutes on LinkedIn and you got the likes of XTO and Marathon Oil and Devon Energy, and they're giving backpacks to the local school. They're giving school supplies. They're investing in their STEM education. I know we did a large project with one of our clients at the park over there where we cleaned up the entire park and did an awesome parking lot project for them. And I mean these producers are giving back to the community as they should, and there's an awesome relationship between the two. I want to touch on something a little bit different though, Ashley. Here you are, you're a female and you're working in a male dominated industry, and especially when we talk about the field, I don't think that, I had the privilege of being in Houston a few months ago, and it was interesting being in the corporate offices of our clients. And as I've worked more and more on the corporate side of our business, there's a lot of corporate females that are involved in the business. There's really, really a good push towards diversification in gender within the corporate fields. We don't see so much of that when we get out to the field, do we?
Right. And make way because we're coming.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It can be a little challenging at times, but really it's just about finding the right company and working for people that have the same values and want to see you succeed. And here at Wescom, it's just a great place to work. And I have the support that I need from my other managers and from the management team to help ensure that I have what I need to be out in the field. And it's exciting. And I think, every time you see like a female truck driver or a female sand hauler, it's like, hi, friend. You
You're
know,
automatically friends.
yeah, we're automatically friends. But it's so great to see that women are being provided the opportunities and given the support that they need to, pull our weight and be involved. And we have so much to offer. And I think you're just going to continue to see more of that in the future.
And you guys, I mean, I can only speak about Ashley and the other gals on our team that, you know, it literally is. You guys have a ton to offer. You bring a different perspective to it. You tend to be way more organized, way more detail oriented. And I'm making some pretty big generalizations there, but we've been nothing but excited and lucky to have folks like Ashley on our team. You especially. What though? What are how do you keep your stamina going when I think even back to when we first started our relationship and you were coming into Wescom, we were back in 2020, things were evolving very difficultly in the later 2020, but prior to the bust, it was just busy, 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 and everyone has their priorities. And I think even if I'm honest with myself, kind of felt like, well, that's just environmental and that's just like something we have to deal with. Whereas now it's like if I miss an environmental meeting, I'm kind of upset with myself because I feel like I'm missing out on the trend in our company and I want to be there. But how do you maintain your enthusiasm, or how did you maintain your enthusiasm, not just for being a female in the oil industry, but also being the word environmentalist in the oil industry?
Yeah, so environmental and oil, it gives all the people the feels, right? And it's not necessarily good sometimes, but I can honestly say we just have the best clients, and I get a lot of fulfillment out of delivering for them and helping them solve their problems and helping make their, life or their job easier in whatever capacity. And we just have such a great team at Wescom. Like we have great people, we have so many opportunities, and so just seeing us grow, I'm very fueled and motivated by the growth. And to see, I mean, there's just so many things we can do. There's so many untapped areas for improvement and things that we can tackle, and new technologies and new processes and new rules that we have to keep up with. So it's an ever changing, evolving environment. And once you get one thing mastered, boom, there's a new rule. We got to relearn everything all over again. But it's just so exciting because really environmental is all about sustainability. And when everything else kind of slows down, environmental is still there. What are we doing to be better, to work better, become more efficient, just become better as an industry? And so all of that's just really exciting. And the growth is exciting. And it's great as we grow to kind of be more of a dynamic within Wescom itself, and kind of pull our weight and show that we're here to stay.
Yeah, and stay you are. I think you touched on something there that was a very important point, is the word fulfillment. If your fulfillment is coming by some sort of a status in society, you're probably not going to do super well as in a female in an environmental department in the oil and gas industry. But if your fulfillment is coming from helping clients succeed, or finding the energy in doing something cool like making the oil and gas industry a better place and have a better name and do the right thing by helping your clients, you're going to have fulfillment. And then these other things are just like, they're more minor challenges that we have in life, right? And it becomes more like, how do we work with each other no matter what? It doesn't matter if we're male, female, environmental, roustabout, mechanical, electrical operator. It doesn't really matter, because those things, we have those challenges no matter what department we land in, right? um,
Mhm.
that's an ongoing thing on how do we actually work together. But the folks that do the best job working together are those that arrive every day with passion for what they do. And
Mhm.
I mean, your passion just came out, and even within all your knowledge that you have in the environmental department. What brought you into the environmental? Was it by chance?
Yes, it was actually by chance. Um, uh, Previously to this, I worked as a sales rep for a production chemical company, and then I worked for 7 years as a frac engineer for Halliburton. So this was my first stab at environmental. But it's interesting because anybody can learn environmental. And you pretty much already have this built-in innate awareness of environmental. If most of the people on my team, we love hiking and camping and fishing, and everybody on my team spends a lot of time outdoors already. So most people have that built in, whether you're aware of it or not, some kind of connection to the environment. So having all of the background experience just in oil and gas, and then being a local and knowing this area, it was just kind of a good segue into environmental. But I'm super glad that I actually ended up here, because this is where I want to be. And this is sustainably, and for the future of the oil field, this is where everybody's attention is going to be.
And I think it's such important work because it's beyond while Carlsbad, New Mexico, in of itself, where you're sitting, is an important element. It's like this whole entire national and global energy conversation that's ongoing, right? And what I love about the fact that we have the environmental team and the mechanical team and the electrical team, and we have all these different teams, is I get to experience all of this and put it all together, and all this knowledge starts to come together, and you're like, whoa, we got to start a podcast and tell people about our cool industry. Because when you're just doing one part of it, that's all you see, right? You just see like, and I'm sure Israel or Fernando, or pick on one of our environmental techs that is working out in the field. They're just seeing that AVO piece, right? It's difficult to broaden that AVO piece and say, wait a second, because we're doing AVOs, we're getting the attention of the EPA and the local jurisdictions, and we're getting them to sign off on the next drilling permit, which, by the way, allows us to pull more energy out of the ground to heat the home up in northern Minnesota, right? Like to tie all that together is so fascinating to me. And I think that's the piece of the untold story of folks like yourself that it can become mundane. You're just showing up and there's another spill cleanup, another big report to write. You got your KPIs you're trying to get done. You work for a psychotic CEO who's trying to run this business. And we're all, we can get caught up in that. And then you step back and you're like, wow, we're actually fundamentally playing a very, very important role in literally energizing America. And by the way, we're doing it in a clean, healthy way. It's a pretty big job.
It is. And just to realize that in, 2018, 36, billion cubic feet of gas was lost. That resulted in a $10 million loss for our industry. So to let our AVO field tech know that this is why we're doing this, we're cutting down on our waste, we're cutting down on our air pollutants and our VOCs that, can cause the low ground level smog. There's the bigger picture there that people don't get to see. But I would definitely say that New Mexico as a whole, and very much the oil and gas industry, is very forward thinking. How can we be a renewable, sustainable, energy source, and how can we become energy independent and make this something that people want, the consumer wants to choose.
And I think we're so close to we're so much closer now than we were even 2 years ago in making that a viable long-term environment, like a sustainable solution, right? I think even when I first started in this business, frankly, we didn't it was all about production and just get stuff done. And oh well, natural gas, we can't get much money out of that anyway. Flare it off, don't worry about it. And then as regulations started becoming more, it was like, okay, well, now we got to satisfy regulation. And now it seems like the whole focus has just shifted, and the industry as a whole has said we need to do this better with or without regulation. And we're seeing producers do things regardless of what the regulation says. They want to do it right, and they're doing a really, really good job at it. So Ashley, we only have a few minutes left, and you've bragged to me about all this knowledge that you have in the energy industry, and specifically in environmental, and the economic impact of what we're doing, the social economic impact that we're having in our industry, but in your passion for what you do. Where do you ever have any free time?
Not really.
Not really. You can't if I mean, you're spitting stats at me that I can tell you're all in here, but what do you do in the rare spare time you do have?
Well, really, I have three children who pretty much dominate all of my spare time. So when I'm not at work, I'm generally doing something at home with them. Or actually, kind of the great thing about the Carlsbad area in New Mexico, there's just a lot of like hidden treasures here. And so my kids and I have recently gotten really into like hiking, and we just went to Sitting Bull Falls, and there's these beautiful kind of really hidden natural waterfalls in an area on the north side of Carlsbad. We like to go out and collect insects, and we play sports and do all the fun things, but we're usually on some sort of outdoor adventure.
And that is so true in the Carlsbad area. I think, I still get the pleasure of meeting some people, on the phone or whatever that are thinking about coming to work. And when we talk about Carlsbad, I'm like, that is a little hidden gem down there. I
Mhm.
haven't spent enough time away from work down there because unfortunately a lot of times, just kind of get pulled into the work scene. But the Carlsbad Caverns are more of a tourist attraction. You go once and you've done it, seen it, but boy, you get out in the hills around there, and I mean, we have done some phenomenal hikes in that area. And I think one of the things that always strikes me about Carlsbad, New Mexico, is the amount of families I see. Like when you go out for dinner or you're just out on a morning run, like there's kids and there's legit families. And you drive by the local school and the kids are outside playing ball, and we get a lot of requests from our employees and from the community for supporting the athletics, that their kids are participating in. And I think it's Carlsbad, any oil field can turn into a negative light in society just because media gets attention by highlighting the bad stories and not the good stories, right? And I think that whether it's you with your three beautiful children and your daughter who's growing up and your sons who are out playing softball, or whether we're talking about Jeff's kids, right? There's
Mhm.
so many of those people in the Carlsbad community, and they do a great job taking care of that community.
Right. And it's oil and gas, it's a small place. Carlsbad, New Mexico is a small place, but it's great to be a New Mexican. It's great to work in this industry, and I just hope that in the future, Americans will be able to see what we're doing here and how we've improved, and what we're doing to really just stick around and be the right choice.
And I think that's where we come into play, right? We got to keep this up and we got to keep telling folks. So if you had to give one parting thought to our audience about environmental and the oil and gas industry in Carlsbad, is that it? This is what we are. We're that cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're America right here. We're the people that are getting up and hitting the gas station at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and going to work, and it's a lot of hours and time spent away from your family and your home. But we're getting up, we're doing the daily grind, and we're committed to our families and to, being better people and leaving the environment better than the way we found it, picking up our trash and giving back to our communities. And so that's really the only way I can describe it. We're here, we're working hard, and we want to continue to stay here. So,
And I don't think you give yourself enough credit, Ashley. I think we're going to have many more podcasts specifically about community and environmental work that we're doing, especially down in the Permian Basin, but just overall as an industry. Because I know you and Shar, you guys are all in, you go to conferences, you're learning. There's a bunch of drone activities coming down. There's so much fun stuff that's happening in our industry. And we'll have to do a follow up to all of that. But I just want to say, not just on behalf of Wescom, but I did a podcast recently with the likes of DRW, and I've done just industry thought leaders in our industry, right? And we're all wanting to do better. So on behalf of the entire industry, thanks for having a voice and speaking up in our weekly meetings and saying, hey, we need to think about this, we need to do it that way, and keep up the good work marching forward for our industry.
okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Bye bye.